Good evening. I'm Father Russ Carmichael, and this is Street Talk. Tonight I have a great guest. As always, actually a return performance. I have Senator Gail Lavielle with me, and across the table I have somebody giving me a hard time. As always, my co-host Dominic. Okay?
It's Representative Gail.
I was going to say that.
You trying to give her Bob Duff's job.
I don't live in Norwalk. I can't take it.
I just wanted to elevate your status a little bit. That's all right, right? I'm sorry.
I think it's lovely where I am.
You want to stay right where you are. Okay. Representative Gail Lavielle. Okay, and we're here tonight, and we're going to talk about money, as always, because you're on the money committee, right?
One of them, yes.
One of them, right?
Yes.
And then you're on transportation too.
And education.
And
where I'm
education.
ranking member.
Right. So we got a lot to talk about. I mean, we were just talking about minimum wage, okay, which aggravates me a lot. The reason that aggravates me, the minimum wage, is because the prisoners used to work growing potatoes and in the state of Connecticut. They used to produce on the farm, and because of the minimum wage, ACLU sued and wanted them to make minimum wage, so they did away with the farm. And doing away with the farm puts people idle hands, you know, and that's tragic. So I mean, what it did to prisoners and what it's going to do to business, I would, I would question. I mean, I can't hire my yard guy who is totally inexperienced for $10.50 an hour. No offense, he's an entry-level individual, and I mean, if I'm going to go with that kind of money, I've got to look to other resources, than somebody who's entry-level to hire. So, I mean, what do people look at this stuff when they're, when they're going before committees and legal process here, or what happens?
Sure. I mean, I think since I have been in the legislature, and this is my 5th session, I think there's been a minimum wage debate every single time, and there is a time when it's appropriate to raise the minimum wage. If the economy is really booming, there's inflation, things are more expensive to buy without anything else happening, it's appropriate to raise it. When the economy is stagnant, it's very difficult. And Connecticut has just raised it in 2 consecutive times, so that now it's supposed to hit $10.10 in 2017. But the proposal on the table now is not actually, in fact, there are 2 of them, it's not actually the minimum wage per se. It's a proposal that we saw last year, which would require very large companies or franchises to pay a fine to the state of $1 an hour if they have any employee who is not earning $15 an hour. So $5 more than the minimum wage will be in 2017. And there are all kinds of arguments for and against this, but essentially Connecticut is having enough trouble attracting businesses here, allowing businesses to grow, create jobs, thrive, not have high overhead costs. And now they're essentially saying, if you've got some guys on the minimum wage and you're one of these large companies, if you don't pay them 50% more, you're going to have to pay a fine. So what large business is going to move here under those circumstances?
Exactly.
And what business planned all of a sudden to be covering that kind of raise in their overhead costs? So it's doing something like that actually decrease available jobs. And you hit a threshold where, yes, it does decrease available jobs.
It
they have
has
to fire people.
It has to. I mean, it's common sense. I mean, that's why offshore. The reason that businesses go overseas is because of wage earning. I mean, that doesn't take rocket scientists. All this stuff is really bothering me from a democratic point of view. I mean, it really is. I mean, minimum wage going up. Okay, we have small business, healthcare. Okay, we take care of people. Now, I can understand the minimum wage going up for our lower people that work in the business that we do. Okay, 10.50 an hour. Okay. Again, what I was just saying, that's one level of individual that I pay for and I have to hire. Then I have I have more than one. I have other individuals that are really not qualified for the job market. And to pay them that kind of money, really, I mean, we go broke. You just go broke. That's exactly what it is. And I guess I'm more Republican than I've realized a lot on.
Physically, you are, yes.
Well, this stuff is getting really out of hand. I mean, the fact is we don't know how to develop jobs.
Well, and really it should be left to companies and businesses to do that. The state doesn't know how to do it either, so the state should just let them do it. And the problem is that Connecticut has driven quite a number of businesses away. And most of the economic development policy in recent years has consisted of just finding ways to give them money to stay, rather than lowering the taxes, lowering the regulatory threshold, and making it easier and more attractive to be here.
Right.
And that's the real issue. And I think some of what happens, and again, I understand this. I mean, there's some big corporations. I don't like Walmart, for example. I think they're a terrible company. And I worked there for a year and 2 weeks once, and I know they're a terrible company. But apart from that, the idea that business is a bad thing, somehow business is bad, and bosses are not good people, and workers are good, and they are by definition persecuted. At a certain point, no, because who is going to employ you if it's not an employer?
Well, I know. When I was,
you have to work to earn a living.
When I was going through school, one of the big things that we discussed when I was getting my master's degree was about corporate ethics and the need for corporations to be able to give back within their communities and to be able to do the right things. And I think for some larger corporations, that piece is missing sometimes.
That's right.
And that's not to accuse everyone, but for some larger corporations and for others, like your Walmarts. Walmart does, give to different communities, but does that offset what they might be doing to their employees, or simply the fact that by keeping their wages so low, these people are having to go on to state assistance? So, in other words, there's a cost factor that comes back to the state either way. Either you're if you're keeping wages low, you're not rising with the basics. Then these people are going to need to be on Medicaid in order to be able to get their health insurance. So it's a big debate about how do we manage both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, one thing I can really attest to, though, I have never had my own company, but I did run a subsidiary of a large company for 5.5 years. And the one thing I knew was that if I wasn't good to the people I employed, and I didn't value them, and I didn't give them something a little extra for really great performance, and if they were, I never asked anybody to come into work when they weren't feeling well. I wanted them out of there. I didn't want them and when they were good employees, they took a laptop with them, and they felt bad because they had to not come to work. Your employees are your greatest asset. And they don't belong to you, but you understand what I mean.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
greatest asset for a business.
For a business, of course.
So any employer who's going to succeed ultimately is going to value them. And so the notion that an employer is really the bad guy, no matter what happens, is outrageous, because somebody has got to create the jobs.
Exactly. I agree with you. I keep my people. I don't want them to go anyplace. And if they're good, they're good. Now the ones here I've had, all my people have been with me since I've been in New London, 14 years, from the homeless shelter to the home health care thing. 14 years. I may have lost one employee, and not because they didn't like working for us. They had their own stuff. So I mean, we pride you take care of your employees. I do that, and I've always done that, and I think that's good. But to be forced is really starting to bother me. The Walmart situation. The Walmart situation is a killer. I like buying. You like cheap stuff. You buy. You can get your deals at Walmart. But they put mom and pop stores right out of business.
They do.
They kill. Okay, they come into an area. If you're a fish store, you're going to be out of business because they'll put you out. If you're a sports store, they'll put you out of business. Any little mom and pop, that's what they do. Besides, not paying their employees. I mean,
The other thing is that what's underlying all that is that the quality of what they sell is terrible.
It's terrible.
So they're actually taking the public to the cleaners.
Yeah, too. Exactly right. Yeah.
But there are lengths to which it is not necessary to go.
Right. Exactly right. But development of business here seems to be one of the biggest problems that I've seen in the state of Connecticut. I mean, they talk about job creation and all that. In fact, of all the jobs that left Connecticut, there has never been a return of that status since, 20 years, 15 years?
That's right.
We have not
one net new job.
Exactly right. And I've had arguments from my own party saying, "Oh no, we created." I said, "No, you haven't. You've lost all these jobs before. Let's go back to what we're really talking about, and you show me where you created anything." It's not happening, and the state it's killing everybody.
Yeah, and in fact, what's happened is a lot of the people who can afford to leave have left. People who do have a high income and therefore can afford taxes,
right,
have left, and a larger number of people who don't have resources or who have very limited resources have come in. And there's nothing wrong with either of those groups, but you need a balance between them for things to keep going and to provide the services that you need, and also to incentivize the folks with the resources to stay. And so we lose a lot of younger people when they graduate from our university system.
Exactly.
We don't have people coming in to start a business or something else. It's very difficult to retire here. It's one of the Connecticut is consistently rated as one of the worst places to retire in the country because they tax Social Security, they tax pensions, and I think there's only 5 states who tax both. So Connecticut is right down there.
Well, I live in a city that's really rough, economically rough, New London. I mean, 2/3 of the city is poverty. Okay, and then you have working class, and you basically have people just hanging on. Now, hopefully, there's some things coming that'll regenerate what's going on, but that problem of new businesses and developing and small businesses, where I really believe is the engine that's needed in a company. It's difficult. I won't say it's not happening, but it's seriously difficult, and I don't know anybody who has the answers to these things.
I don't think there's one particular answer. I know you sit on education committee, and that's I think obviously education is a key component within this. I think Connecticut has done a lot more with the manufacturing end to do apprentices programs and other things along those lines. And I think those are good pushes. I think you have to have you know, it's across the board. It can't just be small companies. It has to be some large companies mixed, because Sikorsky Aircraft, I mean, they, you know, it's not just the people that go and work in the Sikorsky's plant as you drive by them on the Merritt. There's probably another 100 businesses that produce parts for them
That's
within
right.
the local area,
Right,
That's
right.
which are those
All
small
interconnected.
businesses,
Yeah,
which
right.
are all interconnected. So you can't just say it's one thing or the other. You need a diverse, you know, group of people in order to be able to move the economy along. But you also have to have, you know, we were talking about this before, you have to have some sort of wage competition in order to be able to drive wages up, which is what you're hoping for. And unfortunately, in Connecticut, it seems like we recover all the jobs from the last recession at the point that we start to go into a new recession. So instead of being sort of like a V coming in and out of a recession, we're like a drop, and then we're a long L that slowly
right.
works its way up.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
Yeah, it's the education key. Obviously, I believe is the new. I believe we're in a history situation where job development is changing. The manufacturing is changing. We're going to the digital age. Okay, and we're in this area of we're not going to be able to ever develop manufacturing the way we think of it. Our older people like myself is not going to come back. You're talking about new types of manufacturing that needs a retraining of individual, which which is key, because you're talking about younger people that need to have the basis of, they're not doing stop and start like they did for manufacturing, and you only had to get to a certain grade, read a certain level. Now you need the math, science, with that, and you know, these are seriously complicated issues. It's not like you know, Lowell can come in, build up one manufacturing, and you can have
That's
a
right.
Ford type of thing. You're talking small businesses, really, in the digital age, that'll build parts and stuff like that to the, you know, and we're caught in there. We seem to be, you know, caught at that level. And how many years is it going to be to get us out of there?
Well, you know, I think you make a really good point, because there's so much less sort of mechanical manufacturing, and now the big development area is advanced manufacturing.
Right.
But in order to absorb that kind of training, when you go to college or community college or even to a vocational technical high school,
Right.
you need to have the basics when you get there. And that's to go back to our education system.
Right.
The statistics from a couple of years ago were 70% of our students who were entering community colleges in Connecticut, 70% needed remediation in basic reading and math. And of those who go to the Connecticut State University system, the CSUs, it was between 50 and 60% basic reading and math, which tells you that something in our K-12 education system
Right.
is not working. And this is my 5th session also on the education committee, where I'm ranking member. And a couple of things have struck me. One is that during the entire time until this session that I've been there was never sort of an overarching plan to look at all the different types of schools, charters, magnets, neighborhood schools, alternative schools, everything in Connecticut, to say we need a plan for this. Instead, there was a lot of pushing for federal money. Let's go get a federal grant. Let's go get a waiver from this program.
Race to the top.
Yeah, well, there were 3 applications for that, and none of which we got. We did get the waiver from No Child Left Behind. But instead of saying, here's what we need, now how much money do we need to do it, and where can we get it? It was, there's some money available over there, let's go get it and then figure out what we do.
What we're going to do, right.
And there is a bill going through this time that provides for a group that will be consistently in charge of strategic planning. And then the second thing is, you know, we've been without a commissioner for a while. We had a commissioner without an educational background for 4 years, and he left at the end of last year, and there has been a search, and the governor just named a nominee who now has to go through the competition process, but with a very strong, she's been the acting commissioner. She was in charge of academic affairs, Diana Wenzel, and so she's his nominee to be the new commissioner. And I don't like to say too much at this stage because I think it kind of makes the confirmation process unfair, but I will say that working with her since she became acting commissioner, we've had a very good working relationship, and she does know her stuff. So, you know, I think it's a good development that someone will be coming in and taking charge and setting a strategy.
Yeah.
Well, it goes, I mean, that sounds like more of a grassroots type person than somebody who is an administrator.
Yeah, came taught,
Right.
was a teacher for many years and was an assistant superintendent, and then went into, in many different districts, you know, urban, small towns.
Well, the strategic planning, you need strategic planning, and that what always aggravates me is the going after the federal money. Just because it's money, it's there, let's go grab it, and we think it works without really looking. I mean, that's the whole key. In business, you don't start a business without a strategic plan.
No,
Even a small little business like mine, you've got to sit down and look at what you're doing, what you're going to do. And that has bothered me all along with the educational stuff, knowing, I've known for a long time where we're going with manufacturing. I keep involved with MIT, with the universities. You know what they're coming out with, what so far in advance, in certain things I study. I'm saying, well, who's going to make this stuff? Okay, we got this huge population, grassroots, bottom, entry-level population that is totally unemployed and isn't working. There's no jobs for them outside of McDonald's or some fast food place. Okay, that's unemployed. They're unskilled. They do not have the remedial training to go into this stuff. Who's fixing it? I mean, and that's what is really good to hear you say, that somebody's finally starting strategically to look at this stuff from the bottom at the place. All my kids had math science backgrounds because mommies had math science and were okay. Otherwise, they may not have had that. I mean, they may have leaned towards the arts like me, who is not a math science person, which isn't going to make you any money in what's coming down in the later field. Well, you know, you need math science type of remedial stuff with the digital age. Otherwise, you're going to be lost. That's my opinion. But you know.
I was going to say, I was listening to a piece on NPR this as I was driving over here, talking about 3D printers and you know, how they made this car with a 3D printer. But the biggest thing they were talking about, even with engineers, they were talking about with these new systems, engineers aren't just going to be like, you know, straight linear, like, you know, here's your plans on the table.
That's right.
You have to think in 3 dimensions.
3 dimensions.
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
And they almost are going to have like an artistic like quality to them and what they're going to be designing.
Yeah.
Well, see, I'm a great believer in what we used to call a liberal education, because I still think you need that element of how to develop an argument, how to think, how to understand what your point of view is, and then explain it to somebody. Because if you have all that technical skill, and you still have to be able to think, what do I do with this? What purpose does this serve? How can I take it farther?
Yeah.
So I think there has to be some of that as well.
I know, I agree with you. I do. It's almost like, you know, maybe it's the way I'm saying it. I lean too much. It's the idea that you do need the technical stuff now that I would have just as soon not have had. And, okay, I would rather the other artsy side. But this is difficult stuff to put together. Okay, and it's all new. And I'm glad you talked about the car. They put that together in one day.
Yes.
They built that car in one day. See,
It was the body for the car. It didn't include the engine, the suspension, and some other parts.
But they could have thrown that
technical.
together.
But I know one of the things, my father was very highly technical. He designed integrated systems for telephone systems. I think one of them is sold off to French companies that you probably know, Alcatel.
Absolutely. Former client.
And when he would get new engineers that would come in, he would have to teach them how to write some of these technical papers or proposals because they lacked that part of things. So just to have the technical education, you're right. You need all parts of an education to be able to understand things.
And I think that honestly, when you, pardon me, when you look at, I'm sorry, when you look at these gaps in our K-12 education, a lot of what's happening is people can't read by the time they get out of third grade, and there hasn't been enough focus in that early phase of the educational process. And I really think we have to turn around and look at these basics and make sure that kids are getting everything early. And there's another thing that I notice, and maybe it's because I've lived outside of the country for a while, but also, I don't know, I noticed it when I was growing up. There is a value on education that not necessarily everyone gets to absorb when they're very small. I think that all children love to learn instinctively, and there's something in our culture which hasn't necessarily always made education the highest value, and regardless of your economic level.
Right.
Regardless of that. And because, they've done all kinds of studies, but it turns out that when you come from a family that values education, you do too.
Yeah.
And when you don't, and when the people around you don't, you think other things are more important, and you don't put your heart and soul into it. Whether consciously or not. And I think there's some things we need to do as a culture
that's
to
really
reinforce
interesting,
that.
because all my family are lifetime learners. I'm still going to school. I'm in my 70s. I'm still going.
I'm trying to figure out how we can get a PhD program together for us.
Yeah, I haven't got the 65,000.
School is fun.
Yeah, I can't go back to England. 65 grand is too much for finish my PhD. But anyways, the Europeans value education more than their economic level. Okay, you could be respected in other countries because of your education, not your financial wealth. Here it's the other way around. People are respected because of the amount of money that they have versus their education. And you can be a complete dummy, as I know some, who have made millions,
billions,
millions, and that is really, but that's the way we are, and it's too bad, well, we are moving right along. I mean, and I know you've got places to go, and you got jammed up, and I don't. Before I want to make sure you get into people out there that are watching. Anything that you would like to say, because you have a constituency out there. And,
well, we're in the middle of the most intense part of our legislative session. In fact, we should be in the Appropriations Committee, which I do sit on.
Right.
We should be voting on a legislative budget proposal from the majority next week.
Right.
And that's really the sticky wicket right now,
Right.
because as I'm sure everybody has heard, the governor put out a budget proposal in February that slashed a tremendous number of social programs, all kinds of things that we love, we need, all that. It's a proposal, of course.
Right.
In order to be able to afford things, something had to be cut. But there is one part of the budget that only the executive branch, the governor, the administration, can touch, and that is state employee contracts. And right now, the state employees are scheduled in that proposal to get $350 million in raises. That's just the wage part, not the benefits part. $350 million in wages over the next 2 years. Well, all of these programs that those very people are providing are getting slashed. So the question becomes, what's going on here? And of course, everyone in the legislature is upset about all of these cuts, but I believe that it's somewhat irresponsible not to turn as well to that source of great cost, which is those contracts, to bring a little relief to the budget, because in order to keep everything whole the way it is, the revenue's got to come from somewhere. That means taxes, which is, the whole thing is irresponsible. It's irresponsible leaving the legislature with that mess.
And here you have me, a union guy, also a home health care provider, jammed between this because my unions want that money, okay? And of course, as a business individual and a care provider, I don't want that program cut, which is what you're talking about. So I'm between a rock and a hard place, okay? And so I have to say to my union brothers and sisters, hey, look, okay, we especially the ones that work in this area, we want a raise. We're gonna get raises, and what's gonna happen to the programs that are cutting my clients' care?
That's
okay,
right.
so that's where I am. So what do? Then I have to look at the moral issue from the grassroots. Okay, I don't want you to have that raise if you're going to hurt my client, and if you don't like it, I don't care. Okay, I'm old enough to say I don't care. Okay, we want to stay working. Okay, we do want to stay working as union members.
Course.
Okay, and I want to keep the jobs, but do I need the raise in face of what's going on at this time? And that's what you're really asking to look at, and that's what you're going to be having to look at, right? And you've got me out there. Well, maybe not me voting for you, right?
I'd be very honored if you did.
But
it's a really, the administration has left the legislature in a very difficult position, because the legislature cannot demand a negotiation on those. Only the administration can do that. And the population was just had that huge tax increase a couple of years ago. So it's not a good situation, and it's very tense, and it's been very frightening for people who need these programs.
I think sometimes, and I say this in other situations, obviously, Department of Developmental Disabilities, I know you're on their caucus.
The caucus, yeah.
It's a problem between the haves and the have-nots. And the haves want to hold on to what they have, right. And the have-nots are clamoring away saying, we need this. And I know on that end of things, there are lawsuits and other things that were done with back in the mid-'80s, and other things that are to be there and contended with. I know somebody who has a child in one of the regional places, and she's very fond of having. And if she could
That's
take
right.
care of them, she did for the longest period of time. She could take care of them. She did up until she had thyroid cancer, and then she couldn't do it at the same level. I mean, she'd have them at home. But
Well, and the strangest part of the whole thing, the most bizarre part, is that the haves and the have-nots in that situation, they are haves and have-nots for arbitrary reasons.
Yeah.
That's just how it ended up.
Yeah.
And that's not good. There was no plan there either. Nothing was thought out.
And I think that's the overall problem is, there has to be a strategy, and I guess sometimes it's the question of whose strategy.
Well,
but to do things strategically, obviously, to think about them ahead of time, and to figure out a way to be able to transition in between those difficult circumstances. I mean, Department of Developmental Disabilities has $1 billion budget. And people
That's
look
right.
at that and say, that's one out of every $5 that we're spending. I mean,
there shouldn't be 2,000 people on the waiting list.
Yeah, there shouldn't be a waiting list. How do we end up in this situation? And then you have the
That's right.
providers on the other end going, well, we haven't seen any money in 8 years. for a lot of them, and they're
That's
going,
right.
how you want us to absorb this people?
Yeah, Star Inc. is in my district, and they got a 1%
Yep.
cost of living increase. It wasn't the cost of living, within an 8-year period of time. They got 1% once.
Yes. Yep.
They're saints.
Well, we are almost out of time, and we got to bring you back on.
I
all
love
these
being
issues.
here with you all. I enjoy it so much.
We do. We have a great deal of fun, and we deal with some heavy stuff.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, and of course we're going to have you back if you.
We'll get you on out of session.
I'll
come anytime you want.
You know, and deal with this stuff. Dominic, who we got coming up?
Well, you're doing Michael and Art on the night show.
Okay,
live, and then we got Bruce Morris
Well,
here
then we got,
hopefully on Thursday
On
morning.
Thursday morning. Okay, so we got Michael, and actually, we got Michael on the new book that Ralph Ham's book.
Great.
Okay, that'll be Thursday night. Okay, and then Bruce Morris on.
We're going to be doing on tape show.
On tape show. Okay, very good.
Thank you so
Oh,
much.
love having you, Gail.
I love
here.
being here.
I really do.
I'll come
Dominic.
back anytime you
Yes,
want me.
almost done.
Dominic.
Thank you.
And I'm off. Please pray